All right, hey guys, we're going to get started here. I'm having some technical issues right now, though. So while I try to fix those, I'm going to let Jamie Fiddler talk to you. She's from Inspiro. So if you just
Looking at this camera
yeah, right
here.
up there
Okay.
is where.
Hi, everybody. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Jamie Fiddler. I'm a loan officer down at Inspiro Financial. So I wanted to just come and introduce myself. I'm down on the first floor of the Union Heights building. I'd love to get to know all of you, answer any questions that you have on different loan programs. If you're a new licensee, I also would be more than happy to sit down with you, go over the loan process, answer any questions that have come up with clients, anything like that, and then get you information on the different loan programs that we have at Inspiro.
And for you guys that are in California, you can get with your Inspiro person there. You don't have to come here.
Yeah, and I can connect, yeah. In California, we can connect you with some of our awesome loan officers there as well, who I know would be more than willing to go over anything that is of interest.
Okay, do you guys have any questions for Inspiro?
Rates are still as awesome as ever. Most loan programs are still in 2%, which is fantastic. We've got great low fees. Also, something that's a benefit for Century 21 Everest employees is that on any personal transaction, whether it be a refinance or a purchase, we actually waive those fees. So if you're doing a personal transaction, we'd love to sit down and show you what we can do with your loan. So
okay,
yeah.
awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Okay,
and I can send you my contact information to share.
Okay, sure.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
Thank
awesome.
you.
Okay, thanks guys.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I've got a few.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thanks guys. We are going to get rocking and rolling here, but I still have one issue here. Let me see. For some reason, I was still having problems with my AirPods this morning. I don't know what the deal is. I probably just need to reboot my computer, but I figured that out too late in the process to worry about it today. So, hey, I'm excited to be with you guys and share with you a little bit about the listing presentation and talking to you about that. But before we get going on that, do you guys have any questions, anything that I can help with from what we've talked about yesterday, earlier in the week, last week, really kind of just anything that I can help with on answering questions? All right, I'm going to take that as no then. Okay, feel free at any time to unmute and interrupt me, throw in something in the chat box, however you want to go about doing it, but we're going to get going then. So as a few people have started to do, make sure you put first and last name and office in the chat box just so that I have a record of who was here so that I can keep track so that we know who was here. So awesome. Okay, well, here we go then. We're going to get rocking and rolling on this. So as we get talking today, I'm going to share my screen here, my whiteboard again, as I usually like to do. All right. And here's what we're going to do then is we're going to go through and we're going to talk about the listing presentation. Now, as we go through and talk about that, before we get to the listing presentation, I've got a few pieces that I want to put in place. And one of the things probably you guys have noticed about me is as I train, I tend to have kind of some foundational pieces that I want to put in place. And I have found that that's just important to do because as you understand these foundational pieces is going to allow you to then apply the things that we talk about and to help you learn and to understand what those things are. So think of it this way, as what we're going to talk today about in terms of a listing presentation, there are two parts to a listing presentation. So the first part is what we would put here and label as choose me. The second part of the listing presentation is price or pricing, I guess I could even say. So think of it that way. There are two parts to a listing presentation. So anytime, and really, I guess I shouldn't even say to a listing presentation, if you're working with a buyer, the same concept is going to apply. There are two parts to the presentation, whether it's a listing or a buyer, so a buyer or a seller. both times, really, the first thing that has to happen is we've got to get them to choose you or to choose me. You've got to get them to want to be you to be their agent. Now, with that being said, as we're going to talk about in terms of a listing presentation specifically on this, what we want to make sure of is that before we ever talk price with someone, we need to make sure that they have chosen me to be their agent, or chosen you if it happens to be you that's there, right? I want to make sure that they have chosen me or that they've chosen you as their agent before we discuss price. So if that's the case, someone either unmute or type in the chat box, how are you going to handle it then when you have someone that is maybe you're prospecting, let's say, and you start talking to, and let's say a for sale by owner. I'm talking to a for sale by owner, or you're talking to me and I'm the for sale by owner. And I say to you, all right, well, so what is your commission going to be? How much are you going to charge me? How do you want to respond to that based upon the information I just said, which is don't talk price until you find out if they've chosen you first?
Because we don't want to give them all the information and then they choose someone else.
Okay, good. So how are you going to respond then, Barbara?
How am I going to respond?
Yeah, how are you going to respond with? So let's assume you're the agent, I'm a for sale by owner, and I say to you, okay, so how much are you going to charge me on a commission?
6%. Do you have any more questions?
Okay, good.
No.
Now here's the concern though. Here's the concern with that though, is that what if in my mind, well now, and here's the point. So thank you for saying that. And Ginger has thrown in the chat box. She said, that's a great question. We'll be addressing that later in the conversation. Is that okay? Good. So here's the thing. What you've got to remember is this. In these people's mind, and talking just in the public in general, we're all the same. There is no difference between us at a full service brokerage or, and I won't use any names of brokerages, but of people at discount brokers. I'll lump them into that category. In their mind, there is no difference between you that's going to charge a 6 or a 7% commission and somebody that is at a brokerage, which I know of a guy that actually called me this week. He used to be with us and he's now at his own brokerage. He'll take a listing for like $1,200. So in their mind, there's no difference between you at 6% and that person at $1,200. So in their mind, well, then why should I list with you? So the challenge that we have here, when I say the first thing that has to happen is we've got to get them here to choose me. The idea behind that is we have to have the opportunity to do a few things to get them to choose me before we want to talk about price. So I like the way Ginger said it is typically how I will do it is in person, I will use what Ginger said. Hey, that's great. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But before we do that, I need to ask you a few questions to make sure that I understand what you're wanting to accomplish. We first need to find out, am I even the right agent to help you? Because if I'm not, then really it doesn't matter what the commission is going to be. So that's when I'm in person. That's how I'm going to say is I first need to ask you some questions. Now I'll come back to that. If I'm on the phone prospecting, so let's say I'm on the phone and I call up a for sale by owner and that for sale by owner says, well, what's your commission? Well, if I say to them 6%, now remember, in their mind, they've already probably had somebody tell them they'll do it for free, essentially. And why do people do that, by the way? Why are they willing to go take a listing for essentially $0?
They can get sign calls and buyer leads.
Okay, perfect. That's exactly right. Is what is happening is they want to use the house as bait. That's the way that I like to think of it is they're going fishing they're going to use the listing as bait to be able to capture buyers that they can then go and help buy homes. That's what happens. So now most for sale by owners or sellers are not going to realize that that's what's happening. But this agent that I was telling you about that used to be with us, it's no longer, and I think that is $1,200 is what he charges people to list their home. Well, in essence, he wants to do that because think about what's going on for sure in the market today. If you have a listing, that's gold. I saw on a Facebook group for our local board of realtors, an agent posted that they took a listing and they got 98 offers on their property, which is crazy. But so stop and think about that. What agents are thinking, if I can get the listing, I'll be able to have all these buyers then be attracted that I can now help. Well, see, here's the challenge for that to me is today listings are gold. You know, that's money in the bank. So why would you do it for less? Because see, typically in most markets, what will happen is an agent would do that, put it on a price that won't sell because they don't want it to sell, because then they lose the bait that attracts the fish for them to capture. So our job then though on this, I'm getting a little off track there. So what we are wanting to do though, is we've got to get them to choose me. So if I'm on the phone and somebody says to me, well, what's your commission going to be? How I want to respond is by saying, that is a great question. And did you know in the state of Utah, or if I'm in California, for you guys in California, if I'm in the state of California, commissions are negotiable. So one of the things that I can promise to you is that it's going to be a fair commission based upon what you want to accomplish. But in order for me to understand what that looks like, we need to meet so that I can find out what you're wanting to accomplish and what's going to work best for you. And now, typically, though, they still want at least an idea. And so for me, the way that I usually will answer that is I will say, as I'm saying that, so, hey, great question. Glad you asked. In the state of Utah or in the state of California, commissions are negotiable. And so because of that, I first need to know what it is you're wanting to accomplish. But let me tell you this. My commissions range from 0 all the way up to 10%, depending on what you are wanting to accomplish. Now, by me saying from 0 to 10, number one, it's going to make them a little curious. Remember when we talked about on lead generation, you want to make people curious, or you got to have some value that you create. So by me saying, hey, it could be as low as 0, but it could be as high as 10. They're either going to hear the 0 or they're going to hear the 10. And either way, they're going to be interested in either how do I get it to be to 0, or they're going to be curious of why would somebody ever pay you a 10% commission? Now, the idea of that would be there are scenarios, if it's land or if it's a mobile home that's lower in price, that we might do a 10% commission. So that's my thinking on that, of saying from 0 to 10. But I don't know until we get together and talk. And then the other thing that I will throw in is, hey, the good news is I actually work for free till I do the job. See, not many people are willing to go do work for free until they complete the job. So I will say that to them as well. The good news is I work for free until I get the job done. So really, it almost doesn't matter. You're not going to pay me anything if I don't get you what you want out of this property. So what works best, afternoons or evenings? All right, so hopefully that's given you a little bit to work with there in terms of how to handle that. But keep in mind, and I can't emphasize this enough, and even if I'm on the listing presentation, I will not talk price with them until I know they have chosen me. Do not talk price until they've chosen you. And the reason for that is, once you talk price, if they don't like the price that you're quoting to them, they're gone. Now, price could also mean the price of their home as well. How much do you think I could sell my home for? Because that's the other question that will come up. Well, how much do you think you could sell my home for? Well, I'm not sure yet. I would need to come out and take a look at it if I'm on the phone. I don't know. I need to come out and take a look at it, and then we can talk about what price I think you could get your home sold for. All right, so now with that, there are, in fact, I'm going to erase this, start over here. There are 6 pieces to this that we need to put in place. So I'm going to draw this a little bit bigger here. this choose me. This side being priced, okay? All right. So there's 6 things that have to happen for somebody to be willing to choose you, okay? And this, so I want to make sure you understand these pieces, and then we're going to jump into actually the listing presentation itself. But the first thing that has to happen to get someone to be willing to choose you is there's got to be a connection made with them. So this is going to be similar to what we've talked about, or like I say, there's got to be some rapport built. So we've got to have connection or rapport. Now, I'm going to give you these 6 things, and I'm going to show you in the listing presentation where we implement these 6 things so that you can then actually have them choose you so that you can get the listing. Make sense? All right. So the first thing that's got to happen is connection and rapport. And as I said, I'll show you how that comes about and how that takes place as we go through the listing presentation. The second thing that has to happen is that they have to trust you. So in order for them to be willing to choose you, you first have to have some connection or rapport. And let me just say on the connection or rapport on this piece of it, that doesn't mean, oh, you have cats, I have cats too, or you have a dog, I have a dog too. That's not necessarily what I mean by connection and rapport. The connection and rapport could be built around we're working towards the same thing, but more so, hopefully what you learned the last couple days in the needs analysis that we talked about is if you will listen to people and repeat and affirm to them and be interested is what's going to create that connection. More than anything is listening to them. Now, what also will come out of that is that then they're going to trust you. Now, where does the trust come from? The trust comes from how you show up, which is the reason why at Everest, we typically will talk and you'll see more. In fact, I would be willing to wager that across the board, now I'm sure this isn't 100%, but as a general rule, that people who show up to a listing appointment, there is a greater percentage that they are dressed more professional if they're coming from Everest. I mean, stop and think about some of the way that you see agents dressing in Tommy Bahamas and flip-flops and all those kinds of things. So part of this trust is going to be how you show up. Do you show up on time? Are you there on time? So I would recommend getting there a little bit early, showing up to be to the neighborhood early, drive around, get a feel for the neighborhood, some of those things. Showing up early. One of the things that I used to do a lot was what I would do is I would park the car in front of the house. Typically, the people are kind of keeping an eye. They're a little bit nervous about you coming out to talk to them about listing their home. And so they're probably looking out the window to see if you've shown up here. So if I showed up and I parked there a little early and I, would get on my iPad or whatever, and I'm going to be working on some of those things, that's going to be playing into it. Yeah, Ginger just said smile. I don't know if you meant for them or for me. Both probably, right? But yeah, so making sure that as you show up early that you are going to be sitting there taking a few notes. The other thing that I like to do is I would get out of the car and I would stand and I would look at the house and potentially even write a few things down. And typically what I was looking at is I was looking at what does the roof look like? Is it peeling? Does it look like it's okay? I'm going to write down a few notes. Roof looks great. I may have stood and looked at the curb appeal. Curb appeal is good, or could change this, or could change, maybe paint this or that. But I just stood there and kind of took some notes. Again, the idea of it being, they're probably looking out the window to see, are you here? Well, you pull up and get there a little early. You get out of your car. You start to take a few notes, you're kind of glancing at this or that, and then writing some things down. Like you're showing them, hey, I'm already at work before I've even knocked on your door yet, if that makes sense, okay? Now, once we've done that, we go up and we're gonna now knock on the door. They're gonna open the door. I love what Ginger said. Make sure that you smile. Hey, excited to be here. Now, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But how you show up, the handshake, which I guess we don't do anymore, but as we get past COVID and you shake their hand or you do a fist bump, I guess right now or something, but just making sure that you show up professionally, looking professionally, and treating it professionally. I had one particular person, a client that I was helping, that would constantly be saying to me, Russ, we've known each other for X number of years. This is the SOI person. And they said, you don't need to dress up. You can come casual. And in fact, I had one time that they said, just please show up casual next time. But I wanted to send the message of, no, you're important. We're treating this as a business transaction. And so I am going to be professional. All right, so trust. Number 3 is we need them to feel safe. Now, part of where that's going to come from, of them feeling safe, is going to be the fact that they see that you're a professional, they feel like they can trust you, and you've built the connection and rapport is going to allow them then to feel safe. Once they feel safe, they'll open up and share things with you, and they're going to be more open to working with you, to choosing you. Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4, and like I said, I'm going to show you as we go through the listing presentation how all this works. Number 4 thing that you need to have take place in order for them to choose you is we have to create value. So this is going to be similar to what we've talked about before. I've got to create some value. And I'll show you again how we're going to do that. I've said quite a bit about that already in the last other trainings that we've done. But you've got to create value. Now, how we're going to create the value, or a piece of that, is you need to separate yourself. We've got to separate ourselves from the competition. So you've got to separate yourself. Well, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. Because again, remember I started, most of this conversation started with, in the consumer's mind, you're no different than anybody else out there. Now, unless this is someone from your SOI, but even potentially then, they may be thinking, well, I saw this billboard that says that you'll do it for however much money, very cheap. So what's the difference? Why should I list with you versus somebody else? So we have got to separate ourselves. And I'll show you as we go through this how we're going to do that. And number 6 is we have to close. Number 6 is you have to close. You're going to have to ask for the business. Now I'll show you again how we're going to do that, because if you do it right, it doesn't have to be pushy. Remember yesterday I told you guys at the end of meeting in this with a buyer and a buyer presentation that we want to say to them that, hey, as we go out and look at properties next week, I want you to go out there looking based upon the fact that you're going to be writing an offer. So I'm going to ask you after every property we look at, do you want to write an offer on this property? And a no is just as important to me as a yes. Remember that? The whole idea of that was to make it easy so that after we come out of the property, I can say, is this one you would want to write an offer on? And it's okay if they say no. Well, so the same thing with the listing presentation is I'm going to show you how along the way we make it easy for the close to take place. All right. So those are the 6 things that have to happen. Now, just let me reiterate one last time. Do not talk price until they have chosen you. We got to first get them to choose me before we talk about price. So I don't care what happens in the presentation, on the phone, whatever. I am not going to tell them 6% commission. I am going to say it's negotiable. Or if I'm in person, I'm going to say, listen, we're going to talk about that, but I first need to ask you a few questions, and I first need to find out exactly what it is you want to accomplish, and then we're going to put together a plan that will make sense for both of us, that will be a fair commission for both of us. And then what I have found is they will typically go, okay, that's great, let's do it then. All right, so here's the next piece then. Oops. So, all right, now let's get into the listing presentation. So the first thing that we're going to do in a listing presentation, number 1, is what we like to call TAP. Now, some of you may or may not have heard this before, but that's an acronym, TAP, T-A-P. What that stands for is we need to thank them, acknowledge, and promise. Okay, so if you notice, typically, I will say in a presentation, hey, thanks for being here with me, guys. I'm excited to be with you. Well, So that would be part of the thanking piece. So when we get to their house, we knock on the door, we walk in, or they come to the office if it's a buyer presentation. Either way, we want to start with this tap. We want to thank, we want to acknowledge and promise. Hey, thank you for taking the time to meet with me. And then on the acknowledge piece. So when we're talking about this acknowledge part here, what I want you to remember on this is if it's a seller and you're at their house, you want to acknowledge something about the house if you can. Now, there are going to be times when you get out there and it's just a dog, and there's probably not a whole lot to acknowledge them on. You should be able to find something, but let's just say you can. If you can't find something to acknowledge them on, then acknowledge them for taking the time to just meet with you. So you could just say, thank you for having me out. I wanted to just make sure that you know that I understand how busy people are, and I appreciate your willingness. Or let's say it was a for sale by owner, since that's what we were talking about. I know that you got tons and tons of phone calls, and I just really appreciate that you are willing to take the time to let me come out and share with you what I do in getting a home sold. Now, ideally for me though, I want to acknowledge something of the house. So remember I said, I pull up front, I get out, I'm going to be taking some notes. Part of the taking notes is there something there that really stands out that I can acknowledge them for? Meaning, could I acknowledge them for how great the yard looks or the flowers that they have, something like that. So you want to thank them and then acknowledge, hey, and here's how I typically like to do it. Hey, thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I really appreciate your willingness to spend the time with me. I noticed when I drove up and I parked how awesome the curb appeal of your house is. Wow, when it comes to getting your home sold or getting a home sold, curb appeal makes such a big difference in getting the home sold. And what I noticed when I pulled up to yours is that it has great curb appeal. That is going to help me getting your home sold when we put it on the market. So I'm almost kind of even starting to assume the close a little bit by saying, hey, when we put your home on the market, that's going to be one of the huge benefits is the curb appeal that your home has. Okay, so that's the acknowledge piece. Then you want to promise something. So for me, I always like to just say, look, so let's go stick with this for sale by owner, since that's what I was talking about. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. Your home looks great. Hey, I know you got tons and tons of phone calls. I really appreciate that you were willing to take the time to meet with me of all the agents that call. And I promise you, whether we end up working together or not, whether I end up helping you sell your home or not, I'm going to give you some information that is going to help you in getting your home sold. So that's the thank, acknowledge, promise. We want to thank them, we want to acknowledge, and we want to promise. Now remember why we're doing this. Why am I doing it? Because I've got to get them to choose me. And the way that I'm going to is we first got to get this connection or this rapport going that will allow them to trust me and feel safe. Okay. So part of how I'm doing that is through this first tap is just thank, acknowledge, and promise. All right. Now that I've done that, so I think I've acknowledged, I've promised. The next thing that I'm going to do before number 2, so I'm going to just draw a line across here, and I'm going to write it down and say, look at the home. Okay. So you're going to go look at the home. So the next piece that I'm going to do, so I'm going to thank, acknowledge, and then promise them. Then I'm going to go and look at the house. Now, there are 2 different ways you can go about this. Either you can have them show you through the home, or you can go on your own. Now, here's what I will tell you on that. There are pluses and minuses to both. So there are advantages and disadvantages to having them show you through the home, and there are advantages and disadvantages to not having them. So you're just going to have to decide how you want to do this. Do you want them to walk you through the home or do you not? Here's how I decide. There are 2 things that play into it for me as to how I decide. The first way I'm going to decide is based upon, remember, I'm trying to create a connection or rapport. Do I feel like I have connection and rapport? If I don't feel like it's as strong as I would like it to be, I am going to have them walk me through the house. That's the first thing. So remember I said there's 2 things that play into it. The first is, do I feel like there's connection or rapport? And if I don't feel like it's as strong as I would like it to be, I'm going to have them show me through the home so that I can use that as a way to build connection and rapport. so that I can walk through the home and go, wow, whose idea was this? Oh, that was great. You know, that's going to help you in getting this home sold tremendously. What, you know, I love what you've done with the this or that, and we're asking some questions. So that's the number one thing. The second way that I'm going to decide is based upon if I need this appointment to be done quickly, either because they have a something else that, hey, I've only got X amount of time, or because I've got another appointment that I've got to get to, then that will play into if I'm going to have them show me the property or look at it myself. The reason again being, if they are going to walk me through the property, it is going to take longer for this appointment. If I walk through it myself, I can go through a property very quickly and catch things and notice what I need to notice on my own without them walking me through it. And if I feel like that's the way that I want to do it, how I approach that is I say to the potential client, I want to discover your home the way that a buyer is going to. So I would like to walk through it without you pointing things out, because I want to walk through it the way that a buyer is going to walk through it. So again, the reason I would do that is if I feel like I don't have as much time on the appointment, and most important, I feel like I've already got the connection and rapport. If I've got the connection and rapport, then I'm going to just walk through the property on my own. If I don't, I want to emphasize that again, I'm going to have them show me through regardless of how much time I have. Because that, if you're going to make a mistake on a presentation, error on the side of connection and rapport. Error on the side of making sure that you have that. If you don't have it, you're not going anywhere. So error on the side of that. Okay, so now I've looked at the property. We're now going to sit down and go through and start to talk. So the second thing that I'm going to do, so number one was the tap. Number two is I either write this down as map, or I'll write it over here. I'll put in parentheses. Oops, I'm not spelling very well there. Game plan. Okay. Now, typically, if I had you guys here in class with me, how I would have started the class today. If you were all sitting here with me, which I gotta tell you, I cannot wait for that day when everybody's here in person and we have a few on Zoom. We'll always do Zoom. So, but I look forward to the majority of the people being here with me. When that happens, though, in this class, I usually will start the class by saying, okay, guys, hey, so today for our class, at some point, we're going to have a bus pull up front. So the receptionist here at the front desk is going to come in and say, hey, the bus is here. And we're going to go all down and we're all going to jump on the bus. We're going on a field trip. What is the first question that people ask me as soon as I do that?
Where are we going?
Thank you. That's exactly what's going to happen. If I did that in a class, if I just said, hey guys, perfect, the bus is going to be here. We're all going to go jump on it when it shows up. Somebody's going to go, where are we going? What are we doing? Now, we all want to know where we're headed. So the client or potential client, when you show up to their house, they want to know, like, what's the plan? Remember I said they're probably a little nervous. They either have never sold a home before or they don't do it very often, and they're potentially a little nervous about this whole process. And if they don't know you, they're a little nervous. So what we want to do with this number two is, so after I've looked at the house, I'm going to now sit down with them and I'm going to say, okay, let me give you the game plan, or let me give you an overview. Let me tell you about what we're going to do. So I'm going to give them basically that this is what we're going to do. So keep in mind, we're not doing it right now. I'm just telling them what we're going to do. So it would be no different than if you came to class today and I said to you guys, all right, guys, here's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through and we're going to first talk about what has to happen for somebody to choose you. Then we're going to go through and talk about the steps of the listing presentation. And then we're going to wrap up at the end. See, I didn't do any of the stuff. I just told you what I was going to do. Well, that's what this map is, or game plan. So the map stands for motivation, ability, and price. So, but for me personally, I like calling it the game plan. Okay, let me give you the game plan. Let me give you an overview of what we're going to talk about. And then there's 4 things that I'm going to tell them about. So here's the 4 things that we're going to tell them about. So number 1, or A, is going to be needs, wants, and expectations. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like. Here's what's going to happen then. So what I'm going to say to them is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let me give you an overview of what we're going to talk about. The first thing that I want to go through and find out is what are your needs, your wants, and ultimately your expectations of me as an agent. And then I'll share with you what my expectations from you as a seller would be. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Then number 2 that we're going to do, or letter B here, that I'm going to do is after we have talked about needs, wants, and expectations, I'm going to give them then a plan of action. Or I usually will say it on here. I word it for you guys. I call it marketing, even though that's not really what we're doing, is marketing. So in fact, let me go up above here and put in parentheses. This is going to be where I'm going to ask them questions. Down here is where I'm going to separate myself. Okay. So here's how I'm going to say it to them. Is I'm going to say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let me give you an overview of what we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about your needs, your wants, and ultimately what you would expect from me as your agent. And I'll share with you what I would expect from you as a client. Then after that, we're going to talk about what do I do to get a home sold? What makes me different than everyone else? So I'm writing it down here as marketing, but don't think of it as marketing the way that most people think of it. Meaning this marketing piece is not going to be, we put it on 700 websites and we've got this and we got that and all this kind of stuff that, they don't care about. And I'll say more about that in a minute. But marketing is about what you do to get a home sold that's different, that's going to separate you from everyone else out there. Then letter C is going to be the market. So, which is probably why I should change that from marketing. Maybe I should just say it as, I'm going to change it right now. Sorry if it messes up your notes. We're going to call it plan of action. All right. Either way, it doesn't matter. Plan of action. All right. Then the next piece, though, is going to be the market. We're going to talk about the market. And when I say that, what that means, I'll show you as we get into it. But here's how I'm going to word this then to the, well, actually, let me give you number 4, and then I'll just give you the whole script. Okay. Then 4th is close. So let me show you. This is what this is going to look like. So Mr. and Ms. Seller, let me give you an overview of what we're going to do. Is first I need to just ask you a number of questions that will help me understand what your needs and wants are, and ultimately really what your expectations of me as an agent would be. I will then share with you what I would expect from you as a seller as well. After we've done that, I'm going to tell you, what do I do to get a home sold? What's my plan of action is how I guess you could say it. What makes me different than every other agent that's out there is what we're going to talk about. After we've talked about that, then we're going to talk about the market. And we're going to talk about what's going on in the market today and how that affects you and the pricing of your home and you're getting your home sold. And then after that, if you are comfortable and confident with everything that we've talked about, then I'm just going to ask you to sign some paperwork. Okay? And that's how I like to do it is. And then, so that closing piece is, after we've done that, if you are comfortable and confident in me and getting your home sold and us working together, then I'm going to just ask you to sign some paperwork. Okay? And I like to do it as okay, because then what do you think they say when I say okay?
I say, okay.
Yeah, they're going to go, okay. Perfect. So that's the first thing. So let me just make sure on this with you guys. So the first thing is the tap. Then I look at the house. Then I'm going to give them an overview. Here's what we're going to do. Okay. Now that we've done that, let me go to a new page here. And we're going to do number 3 on the list. Number 3 now is going to be the questions that will allow me to find out their needs, wants, and expectations. Okay, so back here on this one, I just was telling them, here's what we're going to do. Now here, we're actually going to go start to do it. So the questions. Now, in terms of the questions, think of it this way. The questions piece is going to be no different than really what we talked about the last 2 days. The idea of this, of typically where I'm going to start off in the questions, is going to be with some type of a directive of share with me, tell me about, help me understand, something along the lines of that deal with me being able to find out what their needs, wants, and expectations are. Now, so ultimately, I like to start with, and this is just personal preference. Well, in fact, actually, let me even tell you, the way that George says he likes to do it is he likes to start it with, share with me, ultimately, what are you trying to accomplish? So you could do it that way of share with me. I'm going to shorthand this, ... what you want to accomplish. Ultimately, what are you trying to accomplish in the sale of your home? Something like that. That's great. I usually like to start with, tell me about your past experience with buying or selling or with real estate agents, something like that. So I usually like to tell me about past experience. So there's not necessarily a right, I'm going to give you a number of questions that I like to ask, but the only difference between this with a buyer, remember I did describe for me your ideal home. And then typically what happens is they then start to describe it and I go, what else? Keep going, say more. With a seller, it's the same concept, but what I have found is you're going to have to ask more questions. Remember on the buyer filling out that grid, all I had to ask was describe for me your ideal home and I could fill it out. With a seller, I'm going to have to ask more questions. So you may want to start with, share with me, what are you ultimately trying to accomplish by selling your home? Which I think that's a great question. What are you ultimately trying to accomplish? And then they're going to tell you, and then you can go, okay, great, I understand. Yeah. And then you can ask questions based upon it, or hey, tell me more about that. Share with me a little bit more. Keep going. That same concept is we got to be starting to drill down. I like to also ask them, tell me about your past experience. And then they're either going to go, well, it was so long ago, we don't remember, or they're going to go, oh, we had this agent and they were horrible. Or they're going to go, oh, we had this agent and they were awesome. Whatever it is, I'm going to then go, well, what made it horrible? Tell me more about what made it horrible. Share with me more about that. Or we loved it. Hey, well, so tell me what they loved. What did they do that was good? What do you wish they would have done? What do you think they should have done differently? Like ultimately, I'm just asking all these questions to find out what they're wanting. Now, in fact, here's the way I like to think of it. Is think of it this way. We're playing the game Jeopardy, if you've watched Jeopardy at all, where all the answers are in their head. Your job is to come up with the questions that will get the answers out of their head. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Think of it as this way. You're going into a test. You're going to be taking a test with this seller. And the way that you're going to pass the test is being able to get all the answers from them. So think of it as it's an open book test. They'll give you all the answers if you'll ask. But if you don't ask, they're not going to just offer to you the answers to the test. So think of it as if you will ask them the questions to get the answers to the test, you're going to get it. Said another way, they have something they're looking for to take place. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they're trying to find somebody that they feel like they can trust. They're going to list their home with the person they feel like they can trust, that they feel safe with, that they feel like is going to take care of them and look out for them. Well, the way that that's going to happen is based upon you asking the questions to find out what's important to them. So these questions are going to be crucial. Now, so let me give you a few other ones that I like to ask about. Now, just keep in mind, we always want to either start with a share with me, help me understand, tell me about, describe for me, one of those type of things. but what I want to find out about is timing. What's important about the timing of it? Meaning, do they need it to happen fast? Are they doing it, expecting it to take longer? I've got somebody that I'm helping, a buyer right now, that the home that they're purchasing, so it's interesting actually. The seller listed their home and listed it at a really high price because they're building a new home and they've got plenty of time. So they thought, well, if we have to move twice, we want to have it at a really high price. Well, as the time has gotten closer and closer and closer, they've slowly whittled away on their price. Well, my buyer that I'm helping with on this right now is a guy that I helped him sell his home, God, probably 20 years ago, I'll bet at least. And in the process, so he left, went to Australia for work, worked in Australia for a number of years, came back to Salt Lake for a short time, left and went in Chicago for a number of years, and then is now back in Salt Lake. He's retired. But called me and said, hey, we're thinking we want to buy a home probably in April-ish because our lease is going to be up. They came here leasing, not sure if he was going to retire or get a job transfer again. Once they got here, they signed a lease, decided to move. So Ginger's asking, did I stay in touch with them all those years? Sort of, I guess. Not as diligently as you would think that I should, I guess is how I would say it, but enough to where when they came back and decided to buy, yeah, he said, you know, the last real estate we did in Utah was with you and we liked it, so we're doing it with you again. So this has been a family friend. So that's when I say enough I've stayed in touch, is just definitely wasn't quarterly, wasn't even annually probably. It was every couple of years, I would say, over that time. Just things throughout the connection with family. So hopefully that makes sense. So anyway, now I forgot what I was going to say. So I just saw a text pop up on my screen that threw me for a second there too. So anyway, so yes, stay in touch with your SOI better than I did on this one. But oh yeah, so here was the point is, because of what's going on in the market though, he called me in November, actually was when he called and said, hey, just wanted to know if you're willing to help us. And I was like, let me think about it. I will. So after that, he then called me in December, said, we might do it a little sooner. We don't know. We're not sure. Then first part of this month, he called me and said, based on the market, we're thinking we probably better get going now. Well, so we go make an offer on this property. We get it accepted, but what we're going to do is a lease back for a couple of months because they don't really want to move yet. My clients are still in a lease till May, so as a result, we're going to get it done. Now, what was my point in telling you that whole story? Oh, timing. So when you're asking them on the listing presentation about the timing, tell me what's important on the timing. Because what I want to find out is are they in that same type of a scenario of this other seller? Well, we're going to build, but we want to make sure we get the home sold because we need the cash, but we don't want to sell it too early, blah, blah, blah. You can, there's where I can then come into play and saying, hey, we've had scenarios where we can just say we're going to list the home, but you're not going to give up occupancy of the property until a certain particular date. See, in our market today with a seller, you can ask just about anything in the buy. I mean, stop and think about that. Out of 98 offers that this agent got, I guarantee you one of them would be like, we'll live with family for the next 3 months if we have to get the property. So, but asking them, so what's important about timing, and then asking additional questions. Just think of it that way, as we've got to keep asking additional questions to dig down. And as we do that, and as we're curious and wanting to know more, what ends up happening is it builds this connection and this rapport where they feel understood. They know you're listening to them and they feel understood. They now start to have trust and feel safe with you, okay? So timing. The other thing that I like to ask questions about to them in this appointment is I am going to ask them about pricing. Now remember, I said we don't talk about pricing, but I'll ask questions of them. And so the question that I like to ask is, share with me how price is going to affect your decision. Now, when I say share with me how price is going to affect your decision, that could go one of two ways. That could be interpreted as the price of their home, or it could be interpreted as the price of the commission. And I intentionally say it, share with me how price is going to affect your decision, because I want to know what they're thinking. Are they thinking the price of their home, or are they worried about what the commission is going to be? And by me asking, share with me how price is going to affect your decision. Now, specifically, if they're interviewing more than one agent, I want to be asking, how is price going to affect your decision? Because that is going to be playing a role in how they're going to decide, probably if you're interviewing multiple agents. Okay. So I like to ask about timing, and I like to ask about pricing. Now, next, the last one that I'm going to do. So for me, and in your script book with the company that you have, in fact, let me see if I can see what page it's on. There are 21 questions for the listing presentation. Now, depending on which script book you're using, if you're using the new one that has Everest Sales System on it, on the front of it, this is going to be on page, let me find it, 38 is what it shows in my book, is 21 questions for the listing presentation. So in your script book, and if you don't have one, just ask at the office to get one. But on page 38, it's going to have 21 questions for the listing presentation. So that's going to give you some ideas of some good questions and things that you could ask. Now, in the old script book, if you have the old one, I think it's on page 81, somewhere, it's either 80, 81, or 82. It says 22 questions, but there's only 21. But there are a bunch of things in here of questions that you could ask. You know, what's important to you regarding an agent and the company you choose? What would you do if your property did not sell or you didn't get the price you were hoping? Help me understand what ultimately made you decide to sell. Share with me, what do you like most about your property? So all of those are great questions that you could ask, okay? But here's the thing. For me, I always want to make sure to ask about timing. I always want to ask about pricing. And then I always like to ask about just the other one I'm going to write up here is just their concerns. Or I will sometimes say it as fear. What's your biggest fear in getting your home sold? Or what's your greatest concern about getting your home sold? Now, here's what I have found. Once you have asked these other questions up here, will create the connection and the rapport so that when I ask about concerns or fears, hopefully I have built enough of a connection with them that it creates the scenario that they are willing to now share with me what their biggest concern is or what their biggest fear is. That's what I want, because once I find that out, that's going to allow me now to then create the plan of action. See, if what their biggest fear is that home is not going to sell, they're going to get stuck or lose out on this other property they're building, whatever it is, I can say, all right, here's my plan. Here's what we're going to do. Because remember, so let me bring this back up over here again for a second. Remember, once I have created this, the connection, trust, and safety, I now need to create value and separate myself. Well, the way that I'm going to do that is based upon the information they give me up here. Because remember I said, it's like we're playing the game of Jeopardy. They've got all the answers here in their head. Our job is to now get it out of their head so that we know what we need to do to help them. Now, here's the big thing though. As you're asking these questions and you're coming up with these concerns and the fears, you've got to be willing to deal with it, okay? Meaning you've got to know that you're going to be willing to do it. If they said to you, and hopefully nobody ever says this to you, but if they said to you, we want an agent that's going to call us every day and tell us what happened the day before. You got to decide, are you willing to do that? So don't offer to call every day if you're not going to do it. So probably say it this way, under promise and over deliver on this. So when you find out what's important to them in these questions, once you find that out, come up with a plan, but under promise on it and over deliver. If you think you're able to do X, tell them something that is good enough, but plan to where you're going to over deliver on it is what we want to make sure we're doing. Okay. Now, with that being said, let's go on to number 4. I'm going to come back to 3 in a second, but I got to introduce number 4. So number 4 then is the separate yourself. Okay. So the next piece of this in this presentation is we're going to separate ourselves. So let me just bring you back to here. So we've now just done the needs, wants, and expectations. So I technically could even kind of come in here and go, okay, we could cross that off. I've done. Now I don't do that in the presentation, obviously, but think of it right now. We've done this, and we've now done the needs, wants, and expectations. Okay, so the next thing we're going to work on next is this separate myself. Okay, so let me come back here on the separate yourself. What I'm going to do with this is, and this is the hardest part for me to train for you guys, because I don't know what they're going to say up here to be able to tell you what you're going to say down here. But I'm going to show you what I mean by that in just 1 second. But ultimately what you need to do is figure out from these questions what is most important to them. What are you going to need to do to separate yourself from everybody that's out there? And I'm going to show you what it looks like, but I'm going to give you an example of one of these on this. So down here under this separate yourself is where I'm going to give them the plan of action. Or you could say it as, what you're going to do. So I'm just going to write it as do. What are you going to do? What makes you different than everyone else that's out there? Okay. Now, with that in mind, let me share with you an experience from this, a story. I mentioned to you about being trained by a mentor of mine that trained me in all this stuff many years ago. And at the time that I was being trained in a lot of this different stuff, we were talking about the needs analysis stuff from yesterday. We were talking about doing it with a seller, though, so tying it to what we're doing today. And what happened was this. There was an agent in the training that had said, I've got an opportunity, and I wish I would have paid more attention for you guys that are in California. I wish I would have paid more attention to where this property was at, because I know it was somewhere in the LA area. And so I don't know if it was in the valley. I don't know, exactly where it was at, but somewhere in that vicinity, that this guy that was in this training said, I got an opportunity for a listing. And at that time, now remember, this was nearly 20 years ago. So nearly 20 years ago, he had an opportunity to get a listing that was 15 million. Now that 15 million from 20 years ago is probably worth what, 40 or 50 million today in California. So picture kind of from that standpoint for you guys that are in California is you've got an opportunity to go out on a listing that is for 40 or 50 million dollars. Now, I've never done one at that level. In fact, I don't even know if we have any in Utah that are, I think I saw one for 29 million or something, but I think it's been for sale for like 4 or 5 years. But so this guy though says, I got this opportunity to go on this listing. Well, the trainer said, hey, if you want, I'll go with you on the listing. And the agent said, yeah, I would love that. So he went out with him on this listing, and they went through this process just exactly like what we are talking about right now, of saying, asking all the questions. Then at the end, they got to this one down here of give me your concerns. And this is why I love this so much. Was what happened is, so let me give you the background on this. So this home that was $15 million at the time, the lady was getting older. Her husband had passed away, and she just had decided this is too much house for me as a widow living here by myself. So she decided to sell it. Well, she ended up interviewing a number of people because word got out on the street that this property was going to come up for sale. And so tons of people were trying to get an opportunity to go on this listing. Well, they went on the listing, and when they got there, when they asked these questions, they got to the end and did what I'm talking about with you guys of just saying, hey, so share with me, what's your biggest concern about getting your property sold? And when they said that, this lady said, well, I've already interviewed 3 other agents, or 4, it was something like that, 3 or 4 other agents. And so far, every one of them has talked to me about how many people they're going to bring through the home. Everybody was telling me how they're going to bring their office through to look at it so that everyone in their office could call any of the buyers that they know. And then they were going to put it on the board tour. They were going to have everyone from the board of realtors come by and take a look at the home so that if they have buyers, they could know about it. And she said, I don't know if you noticed in the living room, the white carpet that was in the living room. And they said, yeah, we noticed that. And she said, well, that was a gift from my husband. He had bought me that carpet as a birthday present. And it was very special to me because of that. And he spent, I don't know, $100,000, something like that. It was handmade in Peru or something. Like this carpet was like an expensive carpet that they put in there. And she said, I understand that when I sell my house, the person who buys it might come in here and rip that carpet out. I totally understand that. But I don't want to see, she said, all I could picture is all of these people tromping through my house and that white carpet being destroyed before I even leave the house. And she said, that's my biggest concern. Now let me explain to you how you would do this then. So up here, when you ask them what's your biggest concern, if that's what their biggest concern is, down here in the plan of action is, what are you going to do to help them with that so that it's not, they don't have to stress about it anymore. They don't have to worry about it anymore. What are you going to do about it? See, that's the difference. When I talked back here about getting them to choose me, then we talk price. See, if you can resolve that concern that they have, that biggest fear, they're going to be less concerned about, okay, what's your commission going to be? Because they now, especially in this scenario, she now understood that these people were going to look out for them to make sure that they were taken care of. So here's what happened is they said, here's what they did is they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to put it on our office tour. We're not going to put it on a board tour. And in fact, we're only going to let people come and see your house who have been pre-approved, that can either give us a proof of funds letter to show, because what we don't want to do, I mean, you stop and think about it, you put a $15 million home as an open house, you're going to have tons of people coming, right? So we're not going to do that. We are only going to let qualified people come through your house. Now, when they do get here, what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the medical supply store and buy booties for them to put on. And we're going to tell people when they get here, they got to put those booties on as they walk through the house so that you don't have to worry about people tromping stuff through your property. Well, guess what? They got the listing. See, typically what it is a matter of discovering what is their concern, what is their fear, what is it that they're worried most about. And then from there, down here in this separate yourself is saying, here's what I'm going to do. I understand your concern. I understand your fear. This is what I'm going to do. This is how we're going to make sure to help you not have that concern anymore. See, if you can help people with that, they'll appreciate it. So let me just give you a few ideas of some other things under this separate yourself that you will typically find. Most of the time, probably the number one thing that I would say that shows up is going to be communication. If they have sold a property or bought a property before, they may have, this is probably the number one thing that comes up is, I'm just worried that I am being kept up to speed of what's going on, knowing what's going on in the process. Unfortunately, remember yesterday or 2 days ago, we talked about complaints about agents. They don't return calls. They don't listen. They waste their time. Well, that's all communication related. They're going to have potentially fears of, I listed my home with somebody once before and I never heard from them again. I know an agent who, actually I know a few agents this way, that I remember going out on a for sale by owner, coming back to the office and this agent saying to me, hey, so what happened with it? And I said, oh man, they were so far up and they would not adjust on their price. So I just told them, you know, I wasn't the right agent to help them. And he goes, who was it? Give me their name. I'll take it. And I was like, oh, I was still a new agent. So I started to feel like maybe I made a mistake by not going after this listing. Well, as I was in this business a little bit longer, I found out that the way he did business was he would go stick his sign in front of somebody's house. He didn't care what price they listed it at. If it sold, great. If it didn't sell, oh well, he wasn't out anything. But what I know is we were constantly at the office getting complaints about this agent, that he wouldn't return people's calls, that he didn't keep his sellers updated. Unfortunately, people have that experience in this business. And so they may have that as a fear. I listed my house once before and I never heard from the agent ever again. Well, if that's their fear, then your job needs to be, okay, how are you going to separate yourself? So let me share with you some ideas on that. So when it comes to separate yourself on this communication piece, if that was their concern, what I'm going to say to them is, hey, I totally understand your concern. I have been around long enough to understand that there are agents who do that. So here's what I'm going to do with you is I call my sellers every week at this date and this time. So like every Wednesday at this time, or every Friday or every Monday, you decide for you. I call my sellers every X between 10 and noon, or whatever time you're going to do it, 10 and 11, to update them on what's happened during the last week. So you can count on that I'm going to call you every time. Now, if they've had that big of a concern about it, that they were that worried about it, I'm going to say to them, we'll even put in an addendum to this listing agreement that says if I don't contact you, if I don't at least leave you a message, either a text message or a phone call or talk to, one of those three, if that doesn't happen every week, if I miss 1 week of calling you, contacting you, the listing's canceled. We'll just cancel it. See, that's the kind of way that I'm going to separate myself from others in terms of communication. All right, now let's go into the next one. Maybe potentially they are worried about marketing. If that's the case, let me tell you how I do it. Now, so here's how you want to do this. Under this separate yourself, what you want to be saying is some version of this. Most agents ... I ... So here's some version of that. So let me show you what I mean. Let's say that they're worried about marketing, the way that their house was going to show or something. Here's how I'm going to handle that one. So under this separate yourself, I'm going to say, okay, your concern was the way that the property was going to look as you were marketing it. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. Most agents are going to come out and take pictures of your home using their cell phone. That's how most agents do it. But that's not the way that I work. Let me share with you the way that I do it. I am going to have a professional photographer come out and take pictures. So see, this whole separate yourself, we want to be most agents. And on communication, you noticed I said, yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of agents that's the way they work. They'll throw your home on the market and then you'll never hear from them until you get an offer. Well, that's not the way that I do it. Let me tell you how I do it. So any of these things you're always wanting to do it. This is how most agents do it. Here's how I do it. So on marketing, most agents are going to use their cell phone. And if they, come out good, they come out good. But I'll even say to them, have you looked online and looked at properties? And they'll say, oh yeah, I've viewed a few. Have you noticed there's a difference between the quality of pictures that some people do? Yeah. Well, what kind of pictures do you want on your house? Well, I want the ones that look good. Well, yeah, most agents, unfortunately, don't do that, but I'm going to have a professional photographer come out. Now, let me give you another example of one. And let me do the process is the same. You're going to take whatever is their concerns and things were up here, and you're going to down here. Most agents do it this way, but here's how I do it. So let me give you another one. Let's talk about the, for you guys in California, you always say lockbox. In Utah, we say key box. So I'll just put key/lock box. So you guys call it lockbox, we call it key box, all the same. One of the things that I will do, so now, and the reason I'm thinking of this one right now is we just had our local board of realtors put out a message. I think it was, I can't remember if it was an email or Facebook now, but the CEO of our board put out this message that said, basically, be careful using a contractor's key box where, you just punch in the code, because on our listing agreements, whether it's our company one or the board one, it says that you will be using an MLS approved lockbox. So if that's the case, then we should be using that. So here's how I'm going to use that though for my advantage. If for some reason they were concerned up here, if they were worried about safety and things, I'm going to bring up to them and say, okay, look, it is not uncommon for agents to just put a contractor's key box on there that they bought at Home Depot. That when they're punching in the code, or any agent is punching in the code, they can watch, you know, their client can watch over the shoulder and see that take place. Well, not me. I use a lockbox that, or a key box, however you want to say it, that only realtors who are in good standing with the board have access to. See, if we have an agent that is not in good standing with the board, they just shut it off and they access it with their phone, but they just shut it off. But if they were really concerned about it, then I'm going to throw this in. The thing that's nice about my lockbox that I use is it has what's called a call before showing, or a CBS code. So I tell them it's a call before showing, to where I can actually put an extra layer of protection to you, to where they have to punch in a code, even if they're in good standing. If they don't know the secret code, basically, that I'm going to put on it, they can't access the key box. So you don't have to worry. See, so again, I'm presenting it as, here's how I do it. Now, the truth is, every other agent out there that uses a board-approved lockbox has the same ability to do it. It's just a lot of them don't know that they can do it. So that's why for me, I like to say it as, here's what my lockbox, or here's what my key box will do, is because other agents probably haven't talked about it. So it seems like my lockbox is a little more special than what theirs is. The other things that I will talk to them about in terms of that is the way that my lockbox works, or my key box works, is that once somebody has shown your property, it's going to then ask them for feedback so that we can get feedback on the showing. Now, again, everybody else's does that, but they're probably not going to talk about it. So that's how I'm going to separate myself with it. So hopefully this is making sense on this separate yourself piece. What you're trying to do is create the scenario for them to see that you're a little bit different. Doesn't even have to be a huge difference, but let me just emphasize one last time and then we'll move on. Figuring out their concerns or their biggest fears, and then coming up with a way to handle those, is going to get you the furthest of where you want to be. All right, next. So the next thing that we're going to talk about. So now after we have done that, so let me actually, let me erase that for a second. Come back here one more time. Once we have completed the separate yourself, then what we're going to do, the next piece that we're going to do up here is, I'm going to just write it here. I mean, typically if I was on the whiteboard in here behind me, I would draw the line across again like I did for showing the home. That was a horrible line. I need like the ability to, oops, I don't know what I just did there. Hold on. Messed something up. All right. I need something that when I do it, it just automatically draws a straight line for me. All right. What we're going to do next, the next piece of this is I want to find out if they've chosen me. So I'm going to write it here as check-in is what I'm going to put it as. But essentially what I'm wanting to find out is, oops, what I'm wanting to find out is, have they chosen me? Okay. So before I go to number 4 here, which is actually going to be the market and pricing, really, that's probably the way to say it is, it's market, but it's also pricing. Before I do that, or are we on number 5? Thanks, Ginger. Number next, whatever it is, 5, thank you. All right. Which is market and pricing. Before I do that though, remember the whole objective of what we are trying to accomplish here is we got to get them to choose me. So far, what I should have done is all of this. Okay. So hopefully I've done all that. So what I'm going to do now is check in to see if that's happened. So this is what that looks like. So now that I have gone through and I've done the game plan of here's what separates me, makes me different than everyone else. The next thing that I am going to do is I'm going to say to them, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, and this is how I like to do it. There's a couple ways you can go about it. Here's how I like to do it. After everything we've talked about, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we at in terms of you choosing me to be your agent? 0 being it's never happening, 10 being, yeah, let's sign it right now. We don't even need to talk anymore. Where are we at on a scale of 1 to 10? And then they're going to throw out some number. If I get any number less than a 10, so if they said to me 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever number they say, which it is not uncommon for them to say, 8 or a 9 is typically what it seems like that you end up hearing is an 8 or a 9. Then what I'm going to say is, okay, what would have to happen for me to be a 10? What would have to take place? So what I'm doing is I'm checking in to see where would you rate me on the scale of 1 to 10? So let me actually just write that on here. So 1 to 10 scale. Anything less than a 10, I'm going to say what would have to happen for me to be to a 10. Because see, in my mind, what I'm trying to figure out is, did I miss something along the way that is holding them back? And then once I say from the scale of 1 to 10, where am I at? They say 8. Great. What would have to happen for a 10? Whatever they say, I'm going to then want to deal with that before I go on to market and pricing. Now, it's possible that that's what the only thing that's missing. We're at an 8. Okay, well, what would have to happen to be at a 10? Well, we need to come to an agreement on the price and the commission that you're going to charge. Okay, so but outside of price and commission, if we can agree on that, you're good with listing your home with me? Yes. Okay, then let's talk about it. If they say no, like, so if I said, let me give you an example. I say to them, where are we at on a scale of 1 to 10? 8. What would have to happen to be to a 10? Well, we've got a couple of other agents we're going to meet with first. Okay. So is there anything that I have not covered that you feel like I should have covered? No, sounds good. We just want to meet with the other agent first. Now remember, well, let me ask you guys, just to make sure you're still awake there. Have they chosen me then? Either unmute or throw it in the chat box. Have they chosen me?
No.
No,
Right. Yeah, they haven't yet. They haven't chosen me yet. And remember, I'm not going to talk price with them until they've chosen me. So here's how I'm going to handle it. Now, you might not decide to do it this way, and that's okay. But for me personally, I have learned, I've done enough for sale by owners and expired listings where you're competing, that here's what I've learned. Is they're typically going to list with the last person they meet with. Now, that could be that, meaning they might say they've got 2 other people they're going to meet with, and maybe the next person in there gets them to sign. They've now listed with the last person they've met with. That's my experience. So here's typically what I'm going to do. If that's the case, I am going to cut off the presentation. We're done. Now, I don't say it that way, but here's what I say instead. Is I'm going to say to them, totally understand. If I were you, I would want to talk to some other agents as well. Now, let's do this then. What I don't want to do is share with you all of my trade secrets of what I do to get a home sold and then have you go list with someone else. So let's have you go talk to those other people. Let's pause where we're at right now. That's usually the wording that I use. Let's pause where we're at right now. Let's have you meet with those other people. But I want you to be willing to let me come back after you've met with those other 2 agents, and let me share with you and answer any questions. If they bring up anything that I didn't cover that you wanted to talk about, I want to do that. But let's pause where we're at before we get into talking about what specifically, how I'm going to market your home and get it sold. Let's pause until after you've met with them. But will you promise me that you won't list with one of them until you and I have had the chance to talk? Now, let me tell you what I've learned though. If you leave without the listing on a for sale by owner and expired, there's a pretty good chance you're not getting it. Now, there are times when they will hold to that and they'll list with you. that they'll wait for you to come back. So I usually will try to do that. Hey, you got to promise me though, just like you're not going to list with me until you meet with them, I want you to promise you won't list with them until I have a chance to come back and share with you or answer any questions that I haven't answered that they may bring up. Okay? Okay. So I'm going to cut it off and leave at that point. Because what I don't want to do is share with them some of the stuff I'm going to share with you that is going to be a difference maker to me. I feel like where I separate myself from others that are out there. So,
But Russ, haven't you already done that? You've already told them your plan of action and how you're going to get their home sold and how you're different from everyone else.
so yeah, thank you. So somewhat, but what I'm meaning is, sorry, and I probably didn't say the right words on that. What I'm more meaning is in terms of the pricing and how the strategy that I'm going to use. I don't want to share with them my strategy that we're going to use in terms of selling the home, the pricing strategy specifically, and the CMA of how I go about doing the CMA, because I have a little bit different approach that I go to with it. And so potentially I will even use that as a way to set myself apart even more when they meet with those people. And so what I mean by that is I might say this to them. Hey, one of the things that I want you to ask these other agents about is how many buyers are there for your house? Now, they're going to give you one of two answers. They're either going to say one, which, yeah, there is really technically only one person going to buy your home. But what I want you to ask them is how many potential buyers there are. How many people are looking for a home like yours right now? And they're either going to tell you one, which, yes, only one's going to buy, or they're going to say, I don't know, there's just so many out there. There's tons. So I'm going to set it up that way because part of how I do my CMA is to show them. I'll give you guys a brief overview of that, but it would take me a couple hours to go through it. So I'm not going to give you the whole how I do that in this class.
So
Right.
Russ, you haven't showed them the CMA at this point, right?
Correct. I have not.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. All right. So let's say that they said, yeah, we're good to go, or as long as we can agree on price, let's talk. Okay, great. So then what I'm going to do then is this, is now under the market, what I'm going to do is this. I'm first going to start with the macro. So meaning the big picture. What's going on in the market today? Well, you guys already know. Here's what I'm going to say. Inventory is low. It's record low. Interest rates are record low. So we got record low inventory, record low interest rates. There are tons of buyers out there competing for houses right now. So how does that affect you? Now, here's the thing though, is I want you guys to understand this from the standpoint of it's not always going to be that way. At some point, interest rates are going to go up. At some point, inventory is going to start declining. At some point, these things are going to change. So to some extent today, yeah, it almost doesn't matter what price you put it on at, it's probably going to sell. But that's not necessarily true. Remember, I just told you, I have a property under contract that I have the buyer on, that what happened is that I mentioned to you guys, sorry, I started thinking about the transaction all of a sudden. The seller had listed this property way high. So it's been on the market. When we went and got the property under contract, it had been on the market over 100 days. Well, that shouldn't be happening in today's market unless you're way overpriced, right? Well, they had slowly whittled away on the price to get it down. So not every property is going to automatically sell is my point, okay? Just because you put it on there doesn't mean it's going to sell. So for me, I just want to explain that to them, that there still are properties not selling, contrary to what you may have heard about the market today, okay? So I'm going to go over the macro, the big picture. Here's what's going on. Then from there, I want to talk to them now about pricing. And here's what I want to do. I'm going to tell you guys some of the strategies that I have used in this. Here's what I'm going to say to them is when it comes to, because it is possible to overprice your property, when we put it on the market, what we're going to do is, my job is to interpret the market for you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. And what that's going to look like is this. Here is what I have learned, is once we put your property on the market, what we are wanting to find out is that, what we're wanting to keep track of in terms of this is the number of showings we're gonna get and the number of offers that we get. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's what's gonna happen. Remember I told you I was gonna call you once a week? What we're gonna be talking about is the number of showings and number of offers that we've got. And then how that's going to affect what we should do on the price. So here, and so this is the part when I was saying, I don't want to give them this idea to then go list with somebody else and follow this strategy. But if we have had, after 3 weeks, and actually to some extent, I might say 1 week in today's market. Now, depending on the price of the home, the higher the price, I may go out to, 6 weeks or once a month or 3 months. Like if it was a $10 million home, I might say every quarter we're going to look at this. But the number of showings that we're getting and the number of offers that we're getting. If after 3 weeks, or like I said, in today's market, maybe even after a week, if we've had no showings and no offers, that means that our price is between, at least I should say, 7 and 10% over. We need to reduce the price. So it's at least 7% overpriced. We need to reduce the price between 7 and 10% to get it shown. So if the property is getting no showings and no offers, it is probably because you are at least 7% overpriced. Okay. If after 3 weeks we're getting some showings, and I would define that as 1 to 3 a week, but no offers, we need to reduce the price between 5 and 7%. Homes will sell within, if they are priced within 0 to 4% of where they should be, they'll sell. If they're not, it won't sell. So if you get to where you're 5% or more above the market, you're not going to get offers. People just typically, as a general rule, now there's always going to be exceptions, but as a general rule, people won't even make an offer if it's 5% overpriced. So you can just know that's part of what I'm going to talk to them in terms of the pricing of the home. This is what we want to be looking at. Now, let me tell you actually a quick story, and I'm going to shorten it a little just for the sake of time. But I had a property that was up, for you guys that are in Salt Lake, up Big Cottonwood Canyon. For you guys that are in California, basically just up one of the canyons towards where the ski resorts are. So I had a cabin that I was helping someone sell. Now the backstory on this was a family member's in-laws. So this is referral from off my SOI that they wanted to sell this cabin. This cabin was built by the parents. So it had been in the family for 60 years. This cabin's 60 years old. It's been in the family the entire time. The parents built it. When the parents died, they left it to 2 of their kids. Now, I don't know why they only left it to 2 because they have more than 2, but they left it to 2 of the kids. Of the 2 kids, they were on as joint tenants, which means they had equal ownership in the property. Well, about a year before they decided to sell this property, the sister who used, I said I was going to keep this short, but I got to give you all the details. So it's not going to be as short as I was hoping. She would use the property every weekend. Like she would come down into Salt Lake and work all week. And then the whole weekend, she was up at the cabin all year long. And the brother, who was my relative's in-laws, the brother would use it a couple times a year, that he would, in the summer go up and stay for a week or so. So she would use it every weekend. He would use it a couple times a year. The older they got, the less he was using it. So the summer before we put this property up for sale, the sister goes to the brother and says, hey, her husband had died. And she said, I'm changing my name on the title. I need you to sign this deed. Well, he doesn't know what he's doing, so he just signed the deed. Well, actually what she was doing was she was changing it from joint tenancy to tenants in common, with her having the majority ownership. And if I remember right, she was changing it to her having like 3/4 ownership and him 1/4 or something. I don't remember the details on that, but she changed the ownership. Well, then not long after that, she approaches him and says, I think it was the next summer, she approaches him and says, hey, I've decided I want to sell the property. You okay with that? And he says, yeah, that's fine. And she says, all right, well, FYI, I now own 3/4 of the property or 2/3, whatever it was. And you own 1/4 or 1/3 of it. And he was like, what? Yeah, that deed I had you sign, we changed it to where I was the majority owner in the property because I used it the most anyway. Well, now at this point, he's calls me at that point, hey, we're wanting to sell this, but here's what's going on. I'm like, out of my league, you got to get an attorney on that one. So he goes and gets an attorney, she goes and gets an attorney, and they basically renegotiate it to where she has 7/12 ownership and he had 5/12 ownership in the property. So, and I don't know how they landed on that, but they did. Well, as a result, she wanted to list the property with somebody that she knew. He wanted to list it with me because I had helped him on other properties. So he wanted to list it with me because he trusted me on getting this whole thing done. Well, they both go to their attorneys. The attorneys both say, okay, both interview an agent. You both need to go and interview your own agent and the other agent, and then see if you guys can make a decision. So I had her come here to the office, sat down, and I took her through exactly what I'm talking to you guys about. Took her through every bit of it. At the end, she was like, wow, I wish she had sold a home that was down inside the Salt Lake Valley as well, not long before this all took place. And she actually said to me, wow, I wish I had talked to you before I sold my property that was down in Sugar House. Which, when she says that, what's the chances that she's chosen me? Pretty good, right? I felt really good leaving that appointment. Afterwards, though, she told her attorney and the brother, well, I still want to list with these other people. And what we had found out later on, after the fact, was that these other people, she was buying another property up there, and they had told her they would give her a discount on the purchase if they would let her sell the property as well. Well, after taking them through this process, I could tell this was going to be an issue by meeting with her. She wanted to list the property really, really high, top dollar value, which potentially could have worked, but the property had some significant issues, meaning it wasn't insulated. So she would go stay up there all winter long, but there was no insulation in this property. Well, she wanted to price it as if it was a perfect updated property. Well, it wasn't. So what I did, bringing you back to helping you understand this, is I said, here's what we're going to do then. They finally landed on that they would let me list the property. But knowing, now here was the agreement. They would list it with me and gave me, I think it was 4 months to get it sold. If it wasn't sold in 4 months, then she could list with her agent. Well, so I knew what she was trying to do. She wanted to list the property at this really high price so that it wouldn't sell, so she could then list with this other agent. Well, now me knowing that that's what she was doing, and the reason I figured it out was just because of asking her all the questions, I could tell what was going on. So I said, here's what we're going to do then. If you're only going to give me 4 months, we're going to follow this pricing strategy. And I actually put it in an addendum to the listing agreement saying, every 3 weeks that the property hadn't sold, if there had been no showings and no offers, we would reduce the price by 7%. If we had had 1 to 3 or more showings, minimum of 1 showing per week during the 3 weeks, so averaging it out of 1 to 3 showings, we would reduce the price by 5%. Well, I sent it over, and all of this was going through both attorneys. So her attorney looks at it, comes back, and actually calls me and says this. Now, you guys that have been in the business for a while should get a chuckle out of this. But he calls me and he goes, we're not doing that. And I said, well, why not? And he said, because basically the way you've got this set up, every 3 weeks, we would keep reducing the price. It could get down to eventually where we're basically just going to offer the property for $25 to somebody. And I was like, all right, well, that's not going to happen, because I promise you, if you get down to a certain price, I'll buy the property myself. So we're not going to get to $25. And he just said, well, we're not going to do it. Here's what we'll do instead. He said, we'll come back and we'll just put on this date, the price will be reduced to this. On this date, the price will be reduced to this. And on this date, the price will be reduced to that. And if it's not sold by the time we get to that third price reduction, then we'll renegotiate. Well, the prices he already had identified, I was like, oh, it'll sell before we get to the third one. I wasn't worried about that. So I said, great. So that made my life even actually easier on this, because I didn't even have to go get anything signed to reduce the price. It was already in the contract. If the property's not sold by this date, the price goes to X. Well, so here's what happened. We listed at the high price and we get an offer right away. I was shocked. I was like, no way, can't believe it. But we did. We get the offer, but then during due diligence, the buyer comes back and says, there's no insulation, which we already knew. There was all these things that they were going to do to improve the property to where really it probably should have been if you're going to use it year round. And so because of that, we want you to reduce the price down to here, or we're not buying it. Well, of course, she doesn't want to do that because it sold so fast. Okay, so now during that time, though, the clock had been ticking. Remember, our contract said on certain date, if it wasn't sold, we would reduce the price. Well, on that date, it now wasn't sold. So she calls me. Because it sold so fast, can we wait 3 more weeks? Well, now at that point for me, with how fast it sold, I was like, yeah, let's do it. Because I was thinking maybe it will sell for more. But then it sat for 2 weeks, I think we had decided. We went 2 weeks. We had little interest, but not much. But because of our contract, I immediately reduced the price. Once we reduced it the first time, it immediately got an offer. The property sold and closed. So here's the point. Have a strategy in place in terms of pricing because it'll save you tremendously. So we want to be future pacing. Remember on day 1, we talked about some of the skills and I said we'd talk about future pacing. This is future pacing. It's saying this is what we want to watch for and this is what we want to do. All right. Then last on pricing, C is then when I'm going to talk about the CMA. So I'm first going to go through and talk to them about the market. Here's how we're going to do our pricing. Now let's land on what the price of your home should be. Now, how I do that, where I was telling you I want to find out how many buyers there are. If you will go and do a search, I'm going to give you like the 2-minute version of this. If you go and do a search for properties that have sold that were like theirs in the last 45 days, you're going to come up with a number of properties that have sold that are similar to theirs. And when I say that, meaning style, location, beds, baths, square footage, stuff like that. From that, you're going to be able to see how many homes sold in the last 45 days that were similar to those. What I have found is that number that you come up with is the number of people that are out looking. Now, I think there's a little bit of variance in that in today's market because of how low our inventory is. We do have a lot more buyers than what we have homes for sale, meaning if our inventory were to double, it would immediately be gone as well. So the number is going to be a little bit harder to calculate in our current market. But I'll tell you, I have tracked it this way since 2006. So for what? Coming up on 15 years now, I guess, I have tracked this and it follows pretty good. Let's just say that there are 5 buyers in that 45-day window. What I have found is you can go search any 45-day window. So you can go back a year ago and use the exact same 45-day window. You will find essentially the same number. Now it might be 4, it might be 6, it might be 7, it might be 3, but it's essentially going to be the same number. So that's what I'm talking about when I say to them, how many buyers are there really for your house? How many potentials are there out there? That's what I mean, is you have to look back in a 45-day window to see how many were there, and then you can project the next 45 days will be the same number of buyers. And the reason for that actually is if you just look at the number of homes that sell year over year, there is a slight increase, but it stays pretty consistent all the time. So that's kind of the idea of that. All right, number 6, last thing is close. Now, on
Can
that,
I just ask a
ahead,
question,
Carla.
Russ? Okay. So my question is, they're going to see that you have a CMA, a listing pack in front of you that you've not opened up. I always play devil's advocate. Oh, so I didn't immediately say you were a 10, didn't immediately, want to sign with you. Oh, so now you're holding back this packet you brought for me? I mean, can you help me work through a comment they might have said that may seem a little negative after you've
Okay,
gone
let's
through that
role play.
process?
Yeah, let's role play. So you say it to me. Say what you think they're going to say.
Okay, well, we're not quite sure. We do have another agent to meet, and he's coming tonight at 6.
Coming tonight at 6. Okay, great.
Uh-huh.
Good. Hey, that's awesome. I'm glad that you're meeting with him. You're going to be able to really see the difference between me and him. So let's do this. Let's set up. Do you mind if I come back after him tonight, or would it be better for me to come tomorrow?
Well, I think we'd have enough to make a decision, but can you just, tell us, what you've brought for us and what you think our houses were?
Yeah, well, so here's the thing. I want you to first hear what he has to say, what he thinks your house is worth, and the information so that you can compare it to mine. But I would rather you see his first, because then mine will really stand out to you. So would it be better for me to come back after him tonight, or would tomorrow be better?
Well, what do you think our houses were?
Yeah, I'm going to share that with you tomorrow after you've met
Oh.
with this other agent. Sound good?
Okay, that makes sense.
So do you want me to come back tonight after him or tomorrow?
Oh, tomorrow's at noon's fine. That's okay.
So, but here's the thing.
I get it though.
You
Yeah.
can't tell me what you think our price is. No, I can, but I want you to see the difference. And I'm going to share with you how I came up with that price. And that to me is part of what you're going to be paying me for. And so I don't want to give away for free
Yeah.
what is my proprietary information.
I want you to see after meeting with them what I can do for you and how you want to pick me. You should pick me to sell your house.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it. Thank you, Thank you.
You're
I have
welcome.
another question, Russ, and
Go ahead.
maybe this is for another training. So in your pre-listing packet, then, I'm making an assumption that you do not include a contract with a commission figure in it, and you do not include comparables. Is that correct assumption? And what do you include in your pre-listing?
Yeah, great question. So, I'm okay, actually, if you do want to put that in there. For me, depends. I guess I should say it depends on who I'm going to meet with. If I'm going to be meeting with a for sale by owner and expired, I know I'm going to be competing. Then for me, I usually don't put that in there. I'm just going to send some just rough information, basically about me. Typically, all I put in there, I don't put in. And there probably are people who would say that's not a good idea. Don't do it that way. So I think it's fine if you want to put it in. For me personally, if I'm competing, I don't put it in for that reason. And I will put in some comparables, but I don't put in a price or anything. All right, last then, close. On the close, essentially, now remember, I checked in up here at the top of where we at. I'm not moving on to this unless they have said, yeah, as long as we can come to agreement on price, we'll list with you. Then once we've done that and we've now landed on a price, I'm going to just say, hey, so how soon did you want it to hit the market? Do you want me to have it go on tomorrow, or do you want it to hit on the weekend? So essentially for me, that's the close. Is I'm assuming based on what we've talked up here that they're going to list with me. So now that we've gone through that, we've landed on a price. Perfect. Hey, so when did you want me to have it hit the market? Tomorrow or the weekend is better for you? Or I'll say, okay, perfect. The only thing left for us to decide is when do you want me to have the photographer come out and take your pictures? And then once they say, well, I don't know, how about on Thursday? Okay, perfect. So let's get them to come out on Thursday. I should get the pictures back on Friday. Let's have it hit the market on Saturday. Does that work for you? Yeah, that works. Great. All we need to do now is just sign the paperwork. So notice the close should be a very simple thing if you've done everything else along the way. All right, what other questions do you guys have? All right. Thanks for being here. So tomorrow is kind of the crescendo of this. So tomorrow's the last day of the class, and we're going to do SOI. If you don't do anything else we've talked about, do what I teach you tomorrow on SOI, and it will work. In fact, part of when Ginger had asked earlier if I stayed in touch with those people all those years, and I said, not like I should have, because I treated them and did what I'm going to teach you tomorrow is why I didn't actually even really have to. Meaning because I did it for about 10 years with them. So if you will do what I teach you tomorrow, now you're going to have to do this stuff for a while, but I'm telling you, after 5, 6, 7, 8 years of doing it, you're their agent. And it's kind of like, that's what I was saying with these people. The reason they called me is because who else are they going to call? That, you know, that. And so anyway, I'm going to show you that. So I'm going to give you 4 protocols tomorrow to where I can show you those things. All right. So Ginger's asking, yeah. So if you go to YouTube and you do a search for Century 21 Everest training, it'll bring up our channel. And then inside the channel, there's a playlist for peak agent training. It won't be on there till probably later today, but I will upload it and it'll be on our company YouTube channel is where the class will be. All right, well, hey, thanks for being here, guys. I'm excited to get to do SOI with you tomorrow. It's one of my favorite ones to teach. So, and it works. So I will see you tomorrow and show you how to do your SOI. Take care.